Well, God dog. Today is one of them North Carolina days. And if you're not sure what a North Carolina day is, you need to come on down to North Carolina and figure out what it means. See, North Carolina, we got this saying that goes, you experience 4 seasons in 4 days, 4 hours. The time is arbitrary, but you're going to have all 4 seasons in North Carolina. And just in this week, last time I was recording a video, it was snowing, and that was just a week ago. And look at it now, it's like 70 degrees. I really don't need the jacket, but I want it because it's fly. And that's just the beauty of partially of seasons, the ability for things to change over periods of time, but also the ability of just being in the right place, which happens to be North Carolina today. Because I know there's somebody out there right now on January 29th that is completely struggling in the cold in the winter, and that's all right because that's your place. But here in this place, we get stuff like this, and I think it's coming in on a really, really, really good day. At least for me, personally. Why is it a good day, you might ask? Oh, well, first off, every day is a good day that you have a chance to be alive. Good is always subjective, but what makes it really good is I finished my first book of the year. I have a reading challenge. I want to read 30 books. Add me on Goodreads. I want to read 30 books this year, and I got 24 last year, and today I cracked and finished my first one. And granted, I did start it last year, and it's been something that I've been working on for a while, but it's done today. And it was a fascinating book called Promethean Fire: Reflections on the Origins of the Mind. I know, it sounds really deep, and it was really deep. Had no idea it was a anthropology book when I first picked it up. I just like the cover and the title because Promethean Fire just speaks to you, right? Like, as a human being, there's something about the myth of Prometheus stealing fire which equates to like creativity, and in this case like culture, technology, and giving that to humanity. And that's what brought us out of like our primordial ignorance, is the power of fire. And fire translated in this book to like culture, and it was culture that has given us this ascendancy almost. And that's what the book was about. It was really showing a link between how genes and biology and culture both work together in harmony to create the mind, the human mind, that is still the most fascinating thing out there. We don't know much of anything, and all the times that we do know a thing, we do some research and we come to find out that, oh yeah, what we knew was actually not fully true. So it tried to explain that, like, it didn't necessarily say like this is the definitive thing, but it really was like an introduction to the topic of how has evolution from Homo habilis, the missing link ape, to Homo sapien, what happened in that 25 to 50,000 year gap that got us things like tool making, organizational structures, different aspects about our lives that we kind of like brush off as normal. And I don't know, as an artist, it's really interesting to always think about, like, you know, the pieces that I create are part of culture, and culture is what determines like our everyday environment, the world that we live in, the decisions that we make, the decisions that we don't make, and just trying to find the link between it all. Just a really good read. But one of the things that stuck out to me as I was getting through the final pages of a book, side note, oh my gosh, just like, you know when you're gonna finish a book, like that energy that you get when you're like, oh, how many more pages are left? And then you look and you're like, oh, I can finish this. And then like there's this like joy and this sense of adrenaline that starts pumping when you're getting closer and closer and closer, and then you finally finish it and you're like, oh my god, I did it. in the session that I thought I was going to do it in. Oh, love it. So yes, I'm exhilarated right now. And as I was in this euphoric state, one of the things that I read in the book was, oh, so poignant. It said something along the lines of what the human species is at each stage of evolution should not be confused with what it ought to be. Page 182, I believe. There's my citations. I mean, just think about that. Like, what we are at each stage cannot be compared with what we ought to be. Whew. We're looking at it from the human species point of view. There's so many conversations and things where we say, well, we ought to be doing this. We should be this. Why are we not this? And it's because we're looking at ourselves as, again, what we think we ought to be, what we think we should be, as opposed to what we really are. And I think a lot of this ties into the studies that I've been doing with Meditations and Marcus Aurelius, which is all about, this whole book is basically about the importance of knowing your nature so that you can act according to that nature and not betray that nature. And that nature is really simple. It's to do good for yourself, to follow, your intentions, to not let distractions and determinants and conceit and opinions of others stray you from the path, and to be a good kinsman, a good neighbor. Simple things. And I'm reflecting on the importance of knowing our nature, and then understanding that, like, we cannot compare ourselves with, again, what we ought to be, what we dream of being, what we fantasize of becoming. We have to acknowledge, like, who we are and what we are today, because that's what we truly are. And it doesn't take away the power of dreams or fantasizing or striving for something greater. Like, ambition is absolutely essential to, like, human development, I would say. However, we can't confuse the potential end product with who we are in the present. And who we are in the present has the ability to make it to the end product, but it isn't the end product. Because if it was, there'd be no need for the journey that we have to take. We would just be the end product. So again, I'm taking that quote, taking my own personal experiences, and really thinking about that in the case of, like, we really gotta know who we are, and it all starts there. Have you asked yourself, who are you lately? Like, when's the last time you questioned you? When's the last time you self-examined yourself? I know I do it kind of inconsequentially every now and then, but I feel that in the last couple months, I've sat down and had those interrogation sessions with myself and talk about just, like, eye-opening experience. Because I'm not the same person that was ages ago, a week ago, years ago, and it's good to navigate yourself with new information. I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were coming together to talk about just, like, being men in today's times. Like, that was one of the things that we talked about, and we talked about how the metaphorical death of boyhood and the transition into the birthing of manhood. And when does that happen for individuals? And I think that answer is subjective to everybody, but I think it's a decision. And what I came to start reflecting more so on is that when I consider myself on a journey to manhood, and it's my personal definition of what manhood is, not necessarily 100% what society says, but it's got aspects of what society says, and then it's got aspects of what society doesn't say, because I think society has a skewed view of men, but that's another 15-minute wander for another day. But what seemed to be really interesting was, again, talking about manhood and saying that I don't want to move forward with my life with information from my childhood as the only driving factor. And I mean that's, and to break that down, I think more so what I mean is I want to move with new information, with new intentions. I want to move and act and behave in a way that is incorporating the more recent knowledge, the more recent discoveries, as opposed to adhering to like age-old traditional principles that I established for myself when I was 18 years old. And that 18-year-old mindset got me to this point. And I recognize also that like I don't want to have an 18-year-old mindset when I'm 32 going on 33 years old. So learning how to lay to rest the previous information and to store it in a vault and say like, no, this information still is important because it gives context to how I became who I am today. But at the same time, it's not the main evidence that is being used in this new experiment of life. And that's really interesting because I think that even in this book that I was reading, I think it was written, had to be in like maybe the 80s or early 90s, definitely no more than the early 90s, because they were even saying like, hey, this is a new study and this is new, and even the evidence and information that we have isn't enough to even begin formulating like true theories. All we can do is just start presenting new evidence and get the conversation and the ball rolling. And I feel like that's similar to what's going on, is that for a while, I think that like I was just getting introduced. I was getting the ball rolling on this manhood lifestyle. And then now it's like, no, now the ball's rolling. And I imagine I finished my Goodreads update with a review for the book, and I said it would be very cool to read like a follow-up to this book after new evidence and theories have been presented about the relationship between culture and biology and human evolution. And I think it's similar to this, is that wouldn't it be cool to see what life would be like if we lived it with an updated terminology and evidence, instead of just like unconsciously accepting that like, oh no, who I am at childhood is who I'm always going to be. And it's like, you can still have and uphold and value the aspects of your child self that is important, like your curiosity, your wonder, your play. It doesn't mean that you take those away. It just means that you're not gonna, you'll think about things on top of that. You might think about play and consequences. You might think about curiosity and risk. You might think about wonder and the capacity to explore. And I just think that that's what is happening, particularly to me, and maybe kind of what I'm seeing in some of the other men that I surround myself with, which I think is just a huge thing, to just have good men in my life as I'm continuing to try and become a good man, whatever that means. But it's all an evolutionary journey. And the thing that I can't confuse myself with is thinking about the kind of man I should be and the kind of man that I am. But if I act like the man that I really want to be, then I'm going to reach that next stage at some point. But I have to recognize that like I'm not that man just yet. And if I want to be that man, I got to work on the man that's here right now. This one right here. I got to work on this self, which means in order to work on myself, I need to know myself. I need to know my nature. I need to examine and ask the right questions so that when it's time to put new theories and new evidence and new experiments into play, that I'm working with the most updated manual. Because best believe I don't want to have to do this work and then come to find out that I'm working with outdated information. Oh, no. Get me the most recent. Get me the now. So that as I do my maintenance, I can become a man that is just himself. through and through. Whether that be grand, good, ghostly, or gone. Just let me be who I am.